Hey, everybody, welcome back. Sitting across the virtual Zoom table right now from us is Dara Scott. He is the CEO, Director of Advanced Science, the manufacturer of the product Hivealive. Dara, welcome to Beekeeping Today Podcast.
Thanks very much. A pleasure to be here.
It's nice to meet you finally, Dara.
And to you.
It's evening there in Ireland. Where in Ireland are you?
Galway. It's the west coast of Ireland, sort of middle west, the wettest place in Ireland you could live, but the nicest place in Ireland you could live.
The wettest place. We'll have to compare notes sometime with Seattle.
I've been to Seattle. Seattle's a million times drier than I used to work on research boats in and out of Seattle, and it was always dry. I'd go back home to the rain.
Yeah, well, you must have been here during the summertime.
To be fair, I was.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's good. Well, good. So we welcome you to the show. We invited you to the show before you became you sponsored a couple podcasts, so we appreciate your sponsorship. But you have a unique product, and the fall is a great time of year to start considering supplementing colonies and getting them strong through the winter here in the States. And we wanted to get you on the show to talk about your product Hivealive.
Great. I'm delighted any opportunity to talk about it.
You know, Dara, in looking at what. Well, let me back up. Let's start with you. What's your background in bees and beekeeping?
I'm beekeeping over 20 years now. I went to New Zealand. I was living in New Zealand for nearly a year, and I saw it everywhere there. It's quite popular in New Zealand, and this is sort of even before the Manuka rush was going on. But you could see hives everywhere. You don't see them at home in Ireland anywhere really. They're kind of all hidden behind ditches and walls and stuff. I think people are afraid they're going to vandalize or something. Whereas in New Zealand, you could see them. So I said, that's pretty cool. I want to check that out when I come back. So I came back to Ireland and joined a beekeeping club, and decided to keep bees. Worked with the beekeeper for a summer. You found a small cluster of bees on a bridge, and it was a cast swarm actually, and that was it. Started off with that and kept going from there.
Not unlike a whole lot of other people who keep bees now. So it's nice to know that you got off on the right foot. Well, where did that take? How did that take you to working on the product that you've got? What were you looking at trying to solve when you started looking at this?
Yeah, so I was working with marine research at the time, and that involved, like I mentioned a second ago, going to sea for long periods of time, at a month at a time. And I was getting tired of it, and I was looking for something that I was passionate about, which was beekeeping. And so I started thinking about, what can I do for beekeeping? What do most people do? Make honey or breed bees or whatever. But they're really, in the west of Ireland, the weather is so fickle that you just couldn't do it. It's not sustainable. So I was looking at other options, and then I was looking at what was going on at the time. Zima Serena had become reasonably newly discovered, although it was around for a lot longer than people realized. And I was looking at that and looking at what could be done about that. So I spent basically about 3 or 4 years researching into the disease, what could be done about the disease, and started developing it from there, working in particular with the university here in Galway, the National University of Ireland, Galway.
Another beekeeper finding a problem and solutioning, coming up with a solution on their own. Yep. That's really good.
So, well, tell us what the solution is. What was the product that you ended up developing?
So, Hivealive, it's a feed supplement for honeybees. We spent a long time developing it. It's the key ingredient in it is seaweed extracts. We have a special patented process for extracting the actives in seaweeds. When I started doing this, seaweeds are just starting to get popular in animal feeds. Now they're quite popular in animal feeds, especially in animal production around the world. At the time, Ireland and Canada are the two top places in the world on seaweed for feed, seaweed extraction, the technology behind seaweeds. I partnered up with some people who are really, really top world-class people on seaweeds and said, look, this is what's going on with the bees. This in particular, focusing on Nosema and general bee health, but Nosema was the key focus, and said, look, what can we do? So we tried a bunch of combinations. We did work in Italy, we did work in the Czech Republic, and eventually settled on a formula that included sort of the thymol and the lemongrass as well. Yeah, so that's how we started developing it.
This is the Zima Serena you were looking at, right?
Yeah, because I mean, Apis was around a long time, and Fumagillin at the time was well, it's not allowed in Europe anymore, but Fumagillin was the time we're able to handle Apis, and it wasn't really a big problem. Whereas Serena is it's funny in the States it's not seen as a big problem. In Europe it's seen as a big problem. And I don't know how that happened. In the US it's sort of like, well, they don't die from it, so it's okay. But I'm still a very firm believer that if there's a couple of million spores in your gut and they're piercing the epithelial cells of your gut and just bursting them open, destroying them, that's not a good thing. So and that's really, I mean, the whole idea was to get Serena under control, which is what our product helps, but also helps. Seaweed extracts are also antibacterial, they're also immune stimulatory, and general overall bee health is what we're looking at. So that's what helps the bees have pathogen levels that are lower in the colony, that's maintaining their colony health. So as a result of that, they end up being more productive, being healthier, surviving winter better, and making more honey and more bees.
Well, with Zima Serena here, you're right. It seldom kills colonies. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but what it does is it challenges the bee's immune system, and that weakened immune system allows other things to come in and challenge the bee even further, viruses being a big part of it. So what you're doing, what Hivealive does then is it reduces the influence of Zima Serena on the bee, which allows the bee to better handle these other problems they have?
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest, we developed around that. It actually does more stuff. We have data now to show it. It's actually was beekeepers told us about chalk brood, that it stops chalk brood in the colony. But also we know we've done in vitro tests to show it will stop the spores of foul brood going on as well. So it's got other advantages for sure. But yeah, the whole idea is like you're dead right. Serena, if bees are doing fine, there's loads of food, Serena won't affect them that much because they can repair themselves and they can heal themselves and they can do fine. But there's loads of data to show that if they're under stress, if there isn't enough food, pesticides, viruses, all these things, if your gut wall is compromised, it's not good. And all these published data show that if you have Serena, these things will affect you more. But even with Apis, when Apis was around, the bees, okay, sometimes they died out, but bees were less productive when they had Apis. They were sick, whereas Serena is more aggressive and around for a longer period of time in the season. So it's always affecting them, not just over winter like Apis used to be. So during the whole summer time when your bees are out working hard, they're also having compromised their gut. Their health has been compromised.
It's kind of flying around with a upset stomach the entire time, or just some sort of intestinal. You're just not getting the nutrients from the food that you should. So
you can't absorb it properly. Yeah. I mean, so to replicate this, Zima Serena basically puts all its DNA into the epithelial cell of the gut. It then uses the energy from the epithelial cell to replicate, and then bursts that cell open.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today Podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
I've got your product now, and it is beefing up my bees, if you will, making them healthier and more productive. Am I feeding this all year long, spring, fall? What's the regimen for feeding this product?
Okay, so the best time to feed is the autumn time, the fall. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is you fed them, they're stored it, so they'll be eating it for a longer period of time, so it's protecting their gut. And the second reason is that we know that the product will also break down spores. So if it's being stored in the comb, you're also sort of breaking down the spores in the comb. So you're sort of essentially sterilizing your comb as well at the same time. that's the best time to do it. So it has the best long-term effect. But also we've seen data that shows spring is also very good. Feeding it randomly during the summertime, I think it's not going to really make a big difference. What we do say though as well is in the springtime you can also do, which is quite good, is a drench where you can use a higher concentration. It's on the bottle. You can use a higher concentration, drench them once a week for 3 weeks, and that makes a big difference to their productivity as well.
And you're doing that in the fall, the drench.
The drench is generally in the spring, when there's very few, when there's very little brood, the least amount of brood possible.
Early
Okay.
spring.
And can I do this when I've got honey supers on?
You can. All the ingredients are safe. They're food safe. You can eat them, but it is going to probably taint the honey and give it a different smell. So I wouldn't recommend it. We say on the bottle, stop feeding 2 weeks before you put supers on.
Okay.
In the same way, you just don't want to get sugar syrup in your supers. You don't get sugar syrup with Hivealive in your supers.
All right. And how much am I feeding? I'm feeding in the fall. How much am I feeding?
So that really depends. The trials that we've done, generally they're a gallon, 4 liters a gallon in the autumn and a gallon in the spring. I'm biased, but I wouldn't feed syrup without it. The more you feed, the more benefits you will get. And it's like if you only feed for a gallon of syrup, then that's perfect. But if you're feeding 10 gallons and only 1 gallon has the Hivealive, it's not going to be as effective as if you did the whole amount of feed with the Hivealive.
Okay. What about if I'm making splits and I've got a good colony, but I'm going to make 2 smaller colonies out of it? Would this help those 2 colonies?
Yeah, it'll help. It'll help any colony. By the way, I should just add for that last point. You're better off feeding if you're only going to feed 4 gallons. So you feed 10. You only have enough for 4 gallons. Make up that 4 gallons. Don't dilute it into 10 gallons because it won't be as efficacious. If you start diluting it, the concentration won't be strong enough. So that's an important point. I should have said at the outset. It works all the time. It's just, I suppose, the best benefits are when you're doing it in the autumn, they feed it for the longest period of time. So they're eating it for the longest period of time. But like syrup isn't ideal. Syrup. I know everyone. Well, most beekeepers feed syrup, but it's not the ideal food to be feeding bees. For no other reason, it ferments quite quickly. And that's one thing that Hivealive stops the syrup from doing. So if you make up syrup, for instance, in the autumn, and you've some left over, you can keep it in the springtime and it's not going to go off because Hivealive is in it. Also, it's not going to, start fermenting in the combs if a cold snap comes in and they haven't dried it all out and capped it off. But the same thing when you're feeding, splits or whatever. It's better. It has nutrients in there as well. It has different minerals, different vitamins, stuff like that as well. But that's not the key focus of what Hivealive is about. But it does have those things. It's also being shown to be prebiotic as well. We're doing some work on some probiotics, totally separate project. But we've discovered that feeding Hivealive 2 weeks between probiotics and Hivealive 2 weeks apart. That there's a synergistic effect. They actually work better than if they were on their own. And that's because there's polysaccharides in the seaweeds that the good bacteria like to live off. But again, that's another kind of side benefit of the Hivealive, not the key focus of what it's about.
That's really interesting. And you're talking about feeding it with sugar syrup. Is that the only way you can provide and give the Hivealive product?
No. You can add it to protein patties, and you can add it to fondant. Both of them are easily added. The only main thing to watch out for there is not to have, same with the syrup, not to have the syrup too hot. You don't want the syrup to be hot; it'll break. So the seaweed extracts are cold extracted, specifically the purpose that heat damages them. So if your syrup is hot or your fondant is hot or anything you're making up with that is hot, it's going to damage that stuff. And actually, we've just released in the US, they're getting shipped out as of, I think it's today or tomorrow to customers, fondant. So we've made our own fondant with added vitamins and amino acids specifically for bees. We launched it in Europe last year. We sold out pretty much immediately, so you didn't get a chance to send over the States in time. But we're just launching it now. They're pre-packed. They're 1 kilo. What's that? 2.2 pounds and these flat pre-sealed bags. It doesn't go off. It doesn't dry out. You just open a little corner on the bottom of the bag, put it over your crown board, over the hole in your crown board. The bees can go up and feed that, which is wicked handy because There is nothing more depressing than opening up your colonies after the winter time and finding bees that after all their bees, their bums sticking out of the comb because they've died of starvation and they're trying to get the last bits out of the comb. Yeah. And worse again is like they had food, but the food was too far away because it was cold. They couldn't get to it. So the fondant deals with that. So they have food, and they have food. If they don't have food, they'll be taking the fondant down. You can see that because the bag is clear. But on top of that, the food is directly over the cluster. So it means that the bees always have access to food very close to them as well. So it gets them through the winter. And then even more importantly, again, is early spring when they start running out of food and all the frames out to the edges are the only food at the very ends of the colony. You put that bag on, they got access to food. So if it gets cold or they start running out of food and it gets cold, they start clustering again. They have access to food straight away in that fondant. So yeah, we just launched it and it's gone. It's a bomb. We're nearly sold out of the stuff already. But very popular.
So I want to go back to the product origination. Why seaweed? What made you think of seaweed? And what about seaweed works for the honeybees?
I'd be honest, I was dead lucky about seaweed. It was a friend of mine I knew who knew this guy who I ended up working with in the end doing this. And he said, why don't you think about, because he knew he was doing stuff with animal feeds, why don't you talk to this guy? And as soon as I talked to him, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And the main reason is that seaweeds, first of all, are very bioactive. There's lots and lots of stuff going on them, but also land-based pathogens haven't evolved to defend against seaweeds. It's totally different for them. It's something totally new. So we're coming at it from kind of left field, if you imagine, and it's quite unique that way. So yeah, and it's seaweeds themselves, the antifungal, the antibacterial, that's stuff that they naturally have in them in large amounts. That just makes it perfect for this application. I mean, it's used in other, like it's used, dairy industry, used in chicken industry. It's used even actually feeding fish. Believe it or not, fish don't normally eat seaweed, but fish and prawns, and horses in particular. Actually, it's used because they just do better with it. So horses, it's more like show jumpers, stuff like that, so they perform better. But for like cattle and stuff like that, is that they put on weight, they get sick less, that sort of thing.
I did feed a seaweed based product for when I had horses, and they did make a difference. And it's interesting with seaweed also, and I can't remember, and maybe one of our listeners can correct me on this, but I do believe that that they found that feeding a certain type of seaweed, adding it to the dairy cattle mixture, reduces the amount of methane. Is that is that correct?
They're environmentally friendly, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I dreamt that.
No, I think it was New Zealand research that did that. Yeah. And they're still working on that. I think that's going to be going mainstream fairly soon.
Really interesting. I was looking at your website. There's 3 different seaweeds, or is it just seaweeds and algae? I'm not sure the difference.
There's a range of different seaweeds in there and a range of different seaweed extracts, and it's proprietary. I'd love to tell you, but I can't.
You'd have to shoot.
Well, yeah, it's our own blend. Right. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I respect that.
Hivealive is a liquid feed supplement for honeybees, and right now is the best time to feed it to your colonies. Hivealive contains a blend of seaweed extracts, thyme, and lemongrass, a unique formula which improves bee gut health, resulting in more bees, honey, and improved overwinter survival. Now, Hivealive has just launched their new fondant patty, which contains the correct dose of Hivealive, vitamins, and amino acids, and comes in easy-to-use pouches, which are great for giving to colonies over winter. Ask about Hivealive at your local beekeeping store or visit the website www.usa.hivealivebees.com for more information.
So the seaweeds produce these products to protect themselves and their environment. And what you're doing is you're taking this protective material out of the sea and putting it on land, which is, I can see why land animals would have like zero resistance to it. I can believe that would work quite well. And you're using more than one kind of seaweed, so you've got a double whammy coming in there. Do you have an infinite amount of seaweed available?
We have plenty available for where we're at. Yeah, for the beekeeping space. It's not a problem, and it's sustainably harvested as well in Ireland, so we're good for that. Also, seaweeds since we've done this, and I've seen it since, but when I developed it first, but people have written into me since about it, is they've seen bees working on seaweed. Now, I don't think it's just the salts, but they like chewing on the seaweed, which I never, when I was developing, I didn't know that at the time, but I have since seen it.
In one of our episodes, and I can't remember the exact number, but feeding bananas to bees. So and you can actually cut up bananas and put them on the top bars and put the super on top, and it's really good for bees. Now I can see people going out to the local tide pool and grabbing a handfuls of seaweed and plopping them on. Well, don't do that. It's really interesting. It's amazing, and it's like you said, it's renewable.
Yeah, yes, it's harvested sustainably, so that's important. It's important to us. Like, actually, to be honest, we're really trying to go down that route now. We've just, our first batch of 500 ml bottles have been made with post-recycled plastic bottles, so bottles that have been plastic taken out of the environment and made into new bottles. The 100 mils are as well. We're working on the 2 liter and the 10 liter. We're just trying to make ourselves, like the office is wind powered. We only have a recycling bin. We don't have we call it black bin here in Ireland, like, the non-recycling bin. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to be as conscious of that stuff as possible.
That's very cool.
By the way, bananas, I like bananas put out an alarm pheromone. The smell of bananas mimics the alarm pheromone.
You would think that, yeah, but I've tried it since we've talked to the person who did the research, and they eat the inside and the skin, and it's all gone.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they said that the banana smells only like the alert. It's not the sting pheromone. And so that it just kind of wakes the bees up. Of course, you don't want to take a bath in banana juice.
I'm interested in, you mentioned that when you have Hivealive in the hive, or you fed your bees Hivealive, that it inhibits the fungal growth of or the growth of American foulbrood, and if you have American foulbrood in your hive and you feed this, it will. Does it help cure the bees? And what about the spores that have been produced? Yeah,
so I'd say straight out of the outset, it's not a treatment for foulbrood. I think if you have foulbrood, you need to manage that, and that's like in Ireland, it's quite serious. I know in the States, it's like in Ireland, you burn the hive. That's what you do. But I don't know what happens in the States. But again, the idea of this is to keep the pathogens level low. So we know that it will stop the spores from replicating and germinating and that stuff. We think it's breaking down the spore walls like it is for the Zima spores. So, like, the spores are always around, and it's really a matter of there being the right amount of spores, the right amount of time with the colony weak enough for foulbrood to develop and become a problem. So the whole idea again is you're storing this over the winter time. It's in the cells. It's sterilizing any spores that might be in the cells, and as a result of that, you've got less pathogens. So there's less foulbrood around. There's less nosema around. There's less chalkbrood around. Now the chalkbrood, it's the beekeepers that told us that if you use Hivealive, you pretty much don't get chalkbrood, but foulbrood is a tougher beast altogether. So it keeps the levels low. That's the best way of looking at it, as opposed to if I have it, I can use Hivealive. Now, we haven't tried it, but I don't think it would work. I don't think it's going to manage it. You'd have to maybe up the concentration. No, I don't even start talking about that.
Well, it goes with every with the belief or the theory that if you have a healthy bee, then it's going to be able to ward off all pathogens better than a weakened bee.
110%. Prevention is better than cure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like someone described before as an insurance policy. Like, it's, if your bees are healthy or doing well, there's way less chance that something comes around that they're going to be knocked back completely by it. But if your bees are getting by and, there's a whole lot of pathogen levels building up and there's all stuff going on, something else comes in, there's a drought, there's whatever, and the bees are going to be hit much harder than if they were healthy.
Right.
That's exactly right. I've got, I've written a couple of books over the years, and one's coming out this fall called Common Sense Natural Beekeeping. And I really wish I would have known about your product, because this is certainly something that people who are looking at whatever you want to consider natural beekeeping to be would be interested in. So I can see that this will do well with that group of people.
Cool.
When we do a review of your book on the podcast, Kim, we can use Hivealive as an addendum.
Okay.
There you go.
We'll do that.
Perfect.
All right. Well, what have we not talked about that we need to know about Hivealive?
Give me a sec. So yeah, I mean, I suppose the big thing about Hivealive versus most other products out there, if not all, is we have lots of data to back it up. We have published data that's, the big trial is peer reviewed in the Journal of Apiculture Research, and I suppose so we have lots of data to show that all this works. And the other part is that it's people kind of look for quick fixes, right? And it's not a quick fix. It does help a little bit in the short term, but it's not this quick fix. Bang! I put it in. My bees are amazing. Problem's all gone. Don't worry about it again. The idea about this product is that you use it, and over time the bees do better and better. Like in the main big trial that we did the trial over a year and a half. Now you could see a difference after a year for sure, but after a year and a half, now they started off with nooks and stuff like that, but the colony population really increased. Like, it's embarrassing how much it increased. It's nearly doubled. Like, and nobody believes us, but that's the truth. That's what happened. Then we did another trial over a year in France, and that I can't remember, was it like a 20 or 30% increase with that trial. Not as much, wasn't a longer period of time, but I'd say best case scenario is you're doubling your colony population over a year and a half. But I think in general you're going to be getting 20, 30, to get 20 plus population increase and 20%, honey increase for a very small outlay of money. The ball is quite small. The ball is very small, much smaller than say competing products, and you only need a small amount in it. It's quite concentrated, but the bang for buck of what you're putting in there and what you're getting out in return is really, like in animal feed. Like if you're in the dairy industry and you could say, I can give you 20% more productivity, they'd be like, what? That's amazing, But it's like, I don't know. It's just different in bees, I suppose. But a small amount goes a long way, but needs to be used consistently.
Well, it's definitely very interesting, and the approach is. I find your approach, taking something out of the sea and feeding it to bees, isn't the first thing I would have ever thought of, but it seems to be working quite well. So congratulations, I guess I should say. If nothing else, just being able to put 2 and 2 together and get 5, and making it work.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's become quite successful. We're in, I think we're like 45, 46 countries at this point in time. And still growing. So it's great.
You must be doing something right.
And you just opened up a distributorship in the United States, correct? That's new.
Yeah. So we've got a warehouse now in the US, so we can sell directly to customers and get quicker out to retailers as well. It just makes it so much quicker and so much easier. Now, I suppose it's been very lucky too. I suppose obviously a lot of people know that with COVID and all that, there's the shipping delays have been on all over the place, and it's been difficult. But we've been able to manage that and keep on top of that this year, which is great. We can get product very quickly to people if they need it, which is nice.
So if I'm a small scale bee supply dealer, someplace, could I get it from you to resell to my customers?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. The email info at hivealivebees.com, info@hivealivebees.com. Okay. And we'll talk to anybody. Yeah, we're delighted to have, because it's nice to have as many places as possible. Yep. That's important. We don't want to just be dealing with 1 or 2 big dealers.
I think we're good. Dara, I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us on Beekeeping Today podcast. Thank you for supporting us and the show. I think it's a wonderful product, and it fits in really well with all types of beekeeping programs. So thanks. It's great.
Thanks very much for the opportunity, and it's
nice having you here, Dara. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's great to talk with you guys finally, and thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You bet.